Hello, I'm Stephen Redman and welcome to another episode of Pastor's Library, where we talk about everything to do with theology books, books that might have had an impact on you in the past, or books that might be hanging over the destiny of your future, maybe books that are on a reading list for a seminary course or a master's or bachelor's degree in theology or biblical studies. If you like what we have to say, please give us a thumbs up on YouTube, and also remember to subscribe and click on the bell. It does wonders for the algorithm, and we do want to make this material as available as it possibly can be. So today I want us to talk about systematic theology. Now, I've done one of my most popular videos on systematic theology, and what I have to say doesn't really change that. But I want to very specifically introduce you to 2023's really new systematic theology. It's written by Frank Macchia, who's a Pentecostal theologian. What I would say to you about this book is that it's not quite as dogmatic as one expects from a systematic theology. I've read through this. I've taken a couple of months to go through this because it's quite a lot of thought into it. I hate to think the amount of work that the authors put into this book. It is a very, very good book. It's called Tongues of Fire, a systematic theology of the Christian faith. And it's published by Cascade in 2023, 458 pages. It's a good heavy book in hardback. I can't really knock it, except to say that when I first engaged with this book, its openness in some areas confused me a little bit, and it stood out from other systematic theologies that are much more dogmatic. But I have to say, the more you get into it, the more you realise that Macchia's viewpoint is to take us through very specific thinkers and to compare them and lead them on his journey to producing a third article theology, in other words, one that emphasises the Holy Spirit, or shall I say, not so much emphasises the Holy Spirit, but gives the Holy Spirit as much coverage as the Father and Christ. It starts with defining theology, takes us back to the 19th and 20th centuries, looking at key theologians, key thoughts that were voiced in those areas. He talks about Schleiermacher, Karl Barth, Paul Tillich, and he compares their thought processes, and he basically remains slightly dissatisfied with all three of them in one way or another. He then takes us through the big changes in theology in the last century, particularly liberation theology, contextual and post-liberal theologies. Every chapter has a sort of a final word which detail the author's journey through that chapter, details his thinking through the chapter, as well as serving as a conclusion for the chapter. It goes on to God exists, which introduces us to a relational God. I like this point of view. He quotes Moltmann and Bonhoeffer and Torrance and Bentley Hart. And Bentley Hart's perhaps not someone that would have leapt to my thinking, but it's very interesting how he draws from all these different ideas. And he summarises by telling us that God is the uncaused cause. God and Suffering is a very good chapter, introducing the concept of theodicy, takes us through some key thinkers like Hick. The next chapter is on Trinity, drawing out of church history and particularly giving the Spirit, shall we say, a little bit more coverage than it might do in other systematics. Shall we say, an even-handed view. There's a really outstanding chapter called God's Perfections. And this is really about the attributes of God. And he starts very specifically in a way that when I'm teaching this appeals to me, which he starts with God is love and bases everything on that. Traditionally, we maybe have always started with God is omnipotent, but he gets to that down the list. But he starts with God is love. And I think that's, to be honest with you, I think that's a very good place to start. And it genuinely is an outstanding chapter. I would say to you, if you're getting this book and you're going to work through it, look out for that chapter. There are then chapters on the Incarnation, a chapter on death, resurrection and Pentecost, a chapter on the Holy Spirit, which specifically talks about the deity of the Holy Spirit, the personhood of the Holy Spirit. There's a chapter on the Spirit and salvation, a chapter on church and election, which isn't quite as reformed as it sounds by the title, but again, I would suggest to you gives a very even-handed view. And it talks a lot about models, marks and practices of the church. So in here you will see key doctrines that we work out within the church. And he has this great quote which I wrote down: the divine inhale that draws us into communion and worship leads to the divine exhale of an empowered overflow of the Spirit to the very ends of the earth. I'm going to try and keep that quote at the front of my own mind. I think there is an awful lot to draw out of that. There is a great section on the final purpose, which deals with life after death and eschatology, and then a separate chapter dealing on last days, which raises to the front the issue of rapture. Also deals with the issue of millennium. And he makes it very, very clear that there is absolutely no record in the history of the church of a rapture theology before John Nelson Darby. And it isn't that he rubbishes the idea, it's that he points this out and makes it quite clear that this is a modern idea. He goes through millennium in as much detail, and he raises his own personal bewilderment at the propagation of these doctrines. Now, Macchia has Pentecostal credentials, and he is very well aware that a lot of Pentecostals still entertain these doctrines, and he, in some senses, might not be making new friends, but at least he is giving a very fair teaching from the scriptures. And he says that basically, when it comes to these doctrines, it isn't up to him to defend alternative viewpoints. It is up to those that propagate these doctrines to actually give us a biblical basis for them. And I think that's really the issue. Most people who are propagating these ideas just basically do not understand the scriptures themselves. So, what I have done the last 2 months, the day this book came, I sort of thought, I just paid, I think, £60 for this. And I figured, this is a lot of money. And I'm not sure that he really is as dogmatic as I had hoped. But as I've worked my way through it, I actually see the other side of this now and realise that he is just telling us, look, this has been my journey of belief. I mean, he teaches systematic theology. And this has been the way that the church has gone, particularly the Pentecostal churches. And he says to us, look, there are these different views. But when it comes down to, for example, John Nelson Darby, where he is exasperated and says very little else, I think that is as clear as you can get, that he is against the propagation of dispensationalism. So it isn't as even-handed a systematic as I first thought. So what else can I say about this? It's got an excellent bibliography, a great subject index. Because this is a 2023 publication, this is going to become a major systematic theology for people from Pentecostal, neo-Pentecostal, charismatic backgrounds. And I would suggest to you it is well worth engaging with. I probably still wouldn't put this up in my top 2, but I probably would put it in my 3rd position or something like that right now. And I think as time goes on, I am warming to this as a systematic theology with greater and greater enthusiasm. So that's Frank D. Macchia, Tongues of Fire 2023. I thoroughly recommend it. It's not in the previous Systematic Theologies video, but I do think this is one to have a look out for, particularly if you can buy it cheaper than I bought it in the UK. So until next time, and may God bless you in your reading. Remember to like this on YouTube. Remember to subscribe if you haven't done. Remember to circulate this among your friends on social media. And until next time, bye.